Hello, and welcome to our session today, Automation for the People, Why Artificial Intelligence is Your Friend. My name is Jonathan Birdwell. I lead the Policy and Insights team at Economist Impact in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In this session today, we're going to look at how artificial intelligence is currently being used, what the combination human-machine looks like now and how it's affecting everyday workflows and productivity. What trends might we expect in the future in terms of smart technologies augmenting work, and how to address the fear factor around new technology adoption, as well as other actions that need to be taken to ensure that automation and AI are not feared, but rather seen as net positives. So to discuss these topics, I'm very pleased to be joined by a distinguished panel of experts who are going to lend us their expertise and views. First, Anna Fink, Senior Director for EMEA Strategy at DocuSign, Joe Park, Chief Digital and Technology Officer at Pizza Hut, Mukesh Dalal, Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer at Stanley Black & Decker, and Rami Darwish, Chief Executive Officer and Founder at Aerolabs. Welcome to you all, and thank you very much for joining us. So let's start just by bringing the current situation to life for our viewers. What does that human-machine combination, what does it really look like across different sectors? How is it changing business practice? And Rami, I wonder if I can come to you first as the technologist on the panel. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate the hype, some misperceptions around what AI can do. Can you just sort of give us a general sense of what is currently possible with AI, and then we'll sort of see how that's brought to life across the different sectors.
Thank you, Jonathan, and it's really great to be here in this panel to talk about this subject because I think there are some misconceptions that are out there about what AI can do, how much does it infiltrate into our daily lives, etc. And I think from that perspective, AI is there to solve complex problems that would take human beings a considerable amount of time and effort to reach a conclusion that the machine can reach in milliseconds or in seconds. And I think that because the machine can do it so much faster and so much more efficiently, that's the reason where some of this confusion comes from around, AI is going to take over everything, or AI is going to be doing everything. And that's not really the case. I think AI, just like what the internet did for communications, AI is doing for assisting workers in the workplace and becoming more productive and efficient and focusing on the things that they need to focus on, their core jobs, and not worry about solving complex things. And I'll give an example, right? If we talk about a problem that in its face seems simple, however, it's not, and the problem is scheduling, right? So you have, let's say, one of our customers that does telecom connectivity for homes has a limited number of resources and a vast geographic area of homes that they need to connect internet services to. And scheduling becomes a very big problem because you have multiple vectors affecting the schedule. One is the travel time. Two is the skill set of the technicians and the employees that need to do these connectivities that are trained on different things. And three is the length of work that needs to be done. So this connection in one house could take 30 minutes, but in a building, it could take 2.5 hours. Now, human schedulers take an enormous amount of time trying to figure this out and trying to do distribution models for these technicians, for these people, to be able to allocate them to the different jobs and the different tasks that they need to do connecting these homes. And it's quite tedious, and there's a lot of mistakes that happen because one element, like I sent a person with a specific skill to a building that the skill required to connect that building, that employee doesn't have. And that happens because of human error, that because of the load on the planners and on the schedulers. So with AI can take all of these different data sets and can use algorithms to figure all of this out on one hand, and create optimized schedules and optimized routes and distribution amongst the technician force to connect these homes on one hand. On the other hand, machine learning can take feedback and data from the work that's being done, learning more about what each employee is more efficient at and less efficient at, and therefore being able to provide a better distributed workload and a more fit workload to the employees. I want to bring in one more point to this example. Some might ask, well, why is that good? Why is that beneficial? I think it's beneficial for two reasons. One, employees get back some of their time because now they're not super focused on where do I need to go next? What is the next job that I need to be doing? So they get to focus more on the core part of their work, which is the technical work that they are delivering, rather than focusing on administrative burden that eats up their time. So it's good for the employee because it removes that administrative burden. It's good for the company because the company as a whole becomes more efficient, and it streamlines different exceptions and complexities that can happen as part of this scheduling, and gives the management a much better bird eye view about the entire operation, that they can make quick and better informed decisions.
Excellent. And Anna, coming to you and sort of try to understand, bring it to life, how automation has impacted the legal sector. I worked as a litigation paralegal back in the early 2000s in New York, and I know, I think that was pre-digital in many ways. And I can imagine all of the things that I was doing back then that are now probably digitized. What does automation AI look like in the legal sector at this point in time?
Yeah, great. And I mean, your experiences are shared by many people in the world today who have to deal with vast numbers of documents and a lot of data contained within those documents. So I think the legal sector is a great example of AI because we really start to think about natural language processing and both the opportunities and potentially limitations that still exist when we talk about rolling out AI to solve complex problems. So when we're looking at documents today, as part of DocuSign or lawyers, we're really thinking about all of the data that's in those agreements, and frequently they're unstructured. And that's because we might have an invoice coming in from one supplier. We might be generating something on our own paper. We might be receiving a contract on third-party paper. And there's some automation you could do if you've got a nice structured approach and you can control everyone in the end-to-end agreement lifecycle. Great. That could be done with some fairly simple technology, that's been around for a long time. When we start to think about actually, how do I understand the concept behind an agreement? If we're looking at things where, a good example from legal negotiations might be a pricing adjustment, where it's a multi-year contract and you maybe haven't tagged that data anywhere, but actually, if you look at that clause, it says that you're allowed to adjust pricing in line with CPI. That's where we start to really see there's missed opportunity, both in terms of understanding risk within those contracts and actually opportunities for revenue in those contracts. So natural language processing, really at its basic concept is looking to identify, how can we take natural language that you might find in that contract and actually make that readable by the machine. And really the outcome from that is how can we structure that then into data that we can use upstream and downstream as part of that to find other ways to get efficiencies. But I mentioned it as a really good example. As I said, there are some limitations. So unfortunately, I would love it if I could promise you that NLP, or the lawyers probably wouldn't like this, could come and actually do a lawyer's job for them. But, legal language and the way we use language as humans is, of course, so complex. And that's where actually thinking about how we work with AI, AI, there's something that it's great at. You can train models to really look for certain types of clauses, maybe limitations on liability, certain language in those contracts very well. For others, actually, it's incredibly complex, and the NLP is getting there. But certainly today, we're rolling it out in conjunction very closely with highly specialized legal professionals who are working together with AI to be able to do their job faster. As Rami mentioned, of course, there's the efficiency gains, but also to be able to identify risk, perhaps in ways that they weren't able to before.
Very interesting. And so two really great and concrete examples so far, telecommunications, legal. Let's move to the food sector. And Joe, how is Pizza Hut using AI in its operations?
Yeah, Jonathan, as I think about the world is getting harder, a lot harder. We have more data, more complex systems to manage, and that's really resulting in what we call this cognitive load demand. You just have to think more than you have. And it's apparent, and we see it in quick service. For us at Pizza Hut, we want to get pizza to our customers in under 30 minutes. The good news is we collect a lot of operational data. The bad news is it's a lot more data now that our employees, who we call team members, need to process, calculate, and act on. For Pizza Hut, AI plays a pretty big role in translating that data, that operational data, into recommendations. Our everyday workflows are being transformed to be more customer and team member centric. We believe that the amount of data and decision making that goes in is feeling that strain. Who would have thought that pizza would need AI, right? It's a fairly simple product. But when it comes to our models that we train, things like the order time, the amount of time that the pizza spends in the oven, how long it takes to pack it, how long it takes to dispatch someone to deliver it, and bundle that with orchestrating multiple orders from multiple people in multiple locations across the store or restaurant, you need help. And the example that we think about is when you all, hopefully all of you are loyal Pizza Hut customers, when you order pizza during a peak hour, our team members, our restaurant managers need to make that decision on who gets which pizza first, what is the route the driver takes, how do I sequence the cooking, and orchestrate all that so you get your pizza in under 30 minutes. What we see is the more of the models we introduce into the day-to-day operations, the hotter, fresher, and tastier the pizza is. And it's a really good example where our team members are now, in increasing amounts, being given recommendations by these models, by AI, on what actions to take. So you're removing the machine out of the human, having them trust the algorithm, and which results in not only a better customer experience, but a better team member experience, because then they can focus that cognitive load elsewhere.
Very interesting. And Mukesh, turning to you, maybe I'm wrong, but I would sort of assume that maybe manufacturing, that's where AI perhaps has been, doing its thing for a little bit longer than some of these other sectors. Maybe I'm wrong, but tell me about how AI sort of shapes Stanley Black & Decker and your role in particular in that.
Sure. So, hello everyone. Good to be on this panel. So at Stanley Black & Decker, we use AI across the board. So Stanley is a very diversified manufacturer. So we have tools, we have manufacturing plants, we do security, and our tools are both for indoors and outdoors. So we take a very broad view of AI. Basically, it is the use of all the analytics techniques in order to extract business value from data. And when I talk about business value, I'm talking about what can you do to improve customer satisfaction? What can you do to improve employee satisfaction? How could you increase your revenue margins? How do you increase safety of the employees? And how do you train employees so that they can basically use the modern techniques in order to improve their work? So to take a few examples, we do demand forecasting to understand what products do customers want and what features of what products are they interested in. Then we take those insights in order to create the right product mix and then manufacture those products in the most effective and the efficient way. And sometimes detecting quality problems early on. So a specific example is we make those tape measures of which you print the measuring the numbers. And one of the problems on those measuring tapes is the ink getting smeared. And the earlier you detect it, you can stop the manufacturing line and fix the problem and avoid waste. and improve the product quality. So we have video analytics where there are cameras looking at the tapes that are coming out of the manufacturing of the line and identify very quickly whether anything is not right. So that's just one application. Another application is we basically use it to allow people, the regular machine operators, to create training videos. So you can take a regular smartphone, uh, take a video of how you are operating a machine, and use natural language processing and video analytics to create small lessons that could be used, that can be shared with the rest of the company to the other operators so that they can learn how to do that job as good as you can do. Uh, we also use AI to analyze which employees are not satisfied in order to reduce the employee attrition, as well as to ensure that we have the right diversity and equity in our leadership. So just the basic analytics, using advanced techniques and forecasting models in order to see how the mix of our employee is going over the next few years, and whether we can make some interventions, whether the models can make some recommendations in order to have the right mix of even the right diverse mix of employees for the regular talent as well as for the leadership. So AI is being used across the board at Stanley Black & Decker.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bikesh. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we got some really excellent examples and a real clear picture now of how AI is shaping. I do want to turn to, in a moment, sort of next wave. What can we expect next? But just interested in, I was reading some recent research, and it was suggesting that actually AI was pushing decision making. It was both centralizing it and decentralizing it, and that was depending on the different business function, and really it was taking away from the middle managers in terms of they were the ones where that decision making power was either pushed up or down. And I'm just curious. This is an open question to anyone, and maybe I'll pick on some people if no one pushed their hand up. But how, if any way, or maybe it hasn't had an impact yet, has AI changed the shape of the workforce in any way? Or perhaps another way to think about it is, who's sort of benefiting most from AI in your business now? Is it the senior leader? Is it the manager? Or is it the frontline worker? Any thoughts?
I'll go ahead and start with this one. So,
go ahead, Anna, and then Joe.
Okay, great. So I think the example that you gave is a really good one, where actually who is this actually going to benefit? Who's saving their time? And if I give an example of a sales contract generation in my space, so, we might be using AI to actually create the right template and to have the really best terms for that agreement, which means that actually we've removed the need for them to go to legal and ask for their approval or advice, because we know it adheres to standard terms and yet hasn't lost that customization for a specific customer's requirements. However, when there is something that does go wrong, then it still needs to go to a very senior, potentially legal resource to do that deeper dive, if it's a very complex negotiation. So in that sense, we're making it easier for the sales team to do the work without perhaps a more junior member of the legal staff who would typically maybe do some of that drafting. So I think, you make a very astute point around actually, for the senior leadership and the very senior lawyers in my area that I'm working in, they still have quite a big role to play, but it's sometimes actually in the middle where we sometimes see them. That's where perhaps the amount of effort required for those roles changes, or they might need to then become more specialized in terms of their ability to review contracts, maybe what they're going to be focusing their efforts on instead.
Joe?
Yeah, what I would add on this is it's absolutely for our frontline employees, of which we have over 500,000 across Pizza Hut globally, where if you think about the front line with our restaurant general managers down to employees working at the make tables, training and coaching are great. I think the world's learning is usually not enough. It's often one size fits all. So who benefits? How is AI our friend? Well, for us at Pizza Hut, you benefit when you have personalized coaching, kind of like a coach in your pocket, at a restaurant level, that lets you know when you're filling out a routine in the store for cleaning, or filling out a routine to check quality, or filling out a routine for inventory, that the data informs, hey, for this one particular restaurant, restaurant general manager, you need to take this personalized action to check your routines. You need to take personalized action to coach your team. And as a result, you'll see better tasting food. You'll see more motivated team members, and so on. So we absolutely see that and believe that is how you harness the power of AI, is when you decentralize it, make it targeted, and give everyone that personalized coaching that you often miss when you only rely on people capital.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then I know Mukesh, you wanted to come in, and then Rami.
Yes. So we basically use AI across the entire range of employees. So the key thing is to improve the decision making at each level. So for the frontline workers, this is the example I gave you about detecting the problems early, stopping the machine line and fixing it. So for other kinds of frontline workers, depending on the stockouts is another example. How do you figure out whether your product is in short supply at a particular retailer, and how could you basically meet the demand there? So that's basically making decisions at that level. At the middle management level, it is creating decisions like what should be the right inventory levels, what should be the right product mix that you should be making. So over the category of the products, what could be the right decisions? And at the strategic higher executive decision making, it is basically how do you negotiate new contracts? What kind of suppliers or the customers you should be providing more material or procuring more material from? So it's decision making across the chain, across the entire hierarchy of decision making.
Fantastic. And Rami, your thoughts on this?
I tend to agree with everyone else on this. I think it's a shared benefit across the different hierarchy levels. And I'm going to give an example from predictive maintenance, where you have IoT sensors that are connected to critical assets, and this is something that we do, and that's sending constant data streams to the back office. Now, for the frontline workers, it changes the game a little bit for them, because it limits the number of truck rolls that they're doing. They're only visiting critical assets where the predictive model is anticipating a potential issue, and therefore dispatching the front line to those critical situations, rather than having a routine inspection visit that they would then have to visit, fill out forms, etc., etc. So I think for the front line, it gets them to become much more productive and focus on areas where their skill set is best used. And then I think for the middle management and for the upper management as well, it gets them to handle exceptions, focus their efforts on where the activity is happening and handling exceptions, rather than looking at it from again, another routine review of activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. And so now turning to the sort of next wave, right? What can we expect coming down the pipeline in, say, 5 to 10 years? What does that look like? And maybe I would start with you, Mukesh, in terms of the manufacturing sector. What are some of the new technologies you're excited about? What kind of additional capabilities do you think you'll be benefiting from at Stanley Black & Decker in the future?
The awesome thing about AI is that the amount of progress, the technical progress that is happening is just wonderful. So, for example, we have been moving from the symbolic machine learning techniques to the deep learning techniques, and the deep learning techniques have moved from CNN, the convolutional neural networks, to transformers and generative models, and the capabilities keep on growing. So, which is amazing and very promising for their business applications. So what we can do now is process more data. So we can and process more variety of data. So if we were to do forecasting, instead of just using the data about those particular products, we can take much wider data, more related products, as well as connect with others, other important activities like the Ukrainian war and COVID situation and stuff like that. So we can collect data, disparate amount of data, whether they be video, audio, natural, or basically just a structured data, combine signals from all of them and create much better decisions. So the quality of decisions and the cost of decisions is decreasing by using these AI techniques. And we are able to take the proof of concept that we were using before and scale it up to much wider applications. So instead of, for example, just looking at one part of the value chain only on the demand side, we can connect the demand signal all the way to the supplier signal, including the manufacturing and manufacturing, not just your own manufacturing, but also contract manufacturing. So you can have this data flow across the entire value chain, optimizing the entire value chain and making better decisions that improve the overall business performance.
Excellent. And Joe, we come to you in terms of also sort of, you mentioned a little bit about, obviously it's helping sort of managers, but I'm interested too, and you mentioned frontline workers in your last comment. Are we going to see more wearables? What about augmented reality? Like what kind of new technologies do you think will make an appearance in the food sector in the coming years?
Yeah. Before I speak about what's coming next, I'll preface it with I'd say the quick service restaurant industry is likely behind. So a lot of stuff that may feel newish to quick service will be things that we see more in our everyday lives. And how I think about this is similar to our personal lives where AI is ever present. It's at home with smart speakers and assistants. It's present on our smartphones and it's present wherever you go as a consumer. The workplace, or in our case, restaurants, have some catching up to do. And it's exciting to see that those consumer-grade experiences with AI will become more ever-present and increase in our restaurants. Whether it's examples that include nudges based on AI recommendations to promote certain behaviors or actions, whether it's integrated into mobile apps or hardware, like you're talking about for wearables, or even just insights through reporting. We think all that's viable. An example of how this plays out in quick service restaurants is AI is coming in, and we're seeing it in places like drive-through ordering with natural language processing and ASR, where AI is getting smarter. It's building that domain knowledge to understand the types of orders that our customers have. It's being present in call center operations where the ordering is being taken by a voice AI, and even order accuracy. That's one of our more recent examples we point to, where computer vision with object detection can see if you ordered a pizza with no pepperonis, we catch it. And we're able to nudge our team members, say, hey, don't place those pepperonis on the pizza. And all these are going to feel and seem to be more visible. They're ones that our team members say, wow, that's AI in action. And our customers benefit from it too. And that goes back to the point I'm making, where things that were once hidden will be a little more outward. We'll start seeing what's happening in that usual black box of AI. We'll see what the AI sees. And through that, we think it'll just start catching up a bit more to what we've become accustomed to over the past 10 plus years.
Excellent. And Anna, I wonder if I could come to you next on this question. And I know when we were speaking previously, you had mentioned ESG, which I thought was quite an interesting example, and sort of company reporting and how that feeds in. And do you see that? Do you see AI playing a role in sort of ESG reporting in the future, and other ways that you see it coming to life and affecting the legal sector going forward?
Yeah, certainly. And it's funny to hear Joe say that restaurants are behind because I feel the legal industry is, very known for being behind on technology. So we're probably even further behind in many ways. But one of the things we're thinking a lot about now is instead of, necessarily, maybe for us, it's less about what new and exciting new AI techniques are coming our way. And for us, more about, well, how can we use what we have and as we continue to improve it to actually become even more meaningful when we apply it to new use cases. So ESG is a great one when we think about the agreement management space. A lot of times what we see today is there is some kind of language into those agreements that might be kind of nascent or talking about we would like suppliers to do a certain behavior, or we would wish our suppliers will comply with a certain set of requirements, or maybe even science-based targets will start coming in to some of those agreements. But how can we actually enforce them? And also, that goes back into the piece around the obligations management and actually using AI to firstly detect that you have the right, that a supplier adheres to maybe certain agreements that you would wish them to adhere to on the ESG front. But then also when we start to think about the actual enforceability of a more sustainable supply chain, how can we use AI to actually enforce some of those obligations and track those obligations. So very topical in terms of not just saying we'd like to be more sustainable, but actually how can we use AI to enforce sustainability across the supply chain? And certainly, in the legal space, but also, for the others on this panel who, of course, are working, who procurement's part of every business, really, that really is something that I think is going to come in across the board.
Excellent. And then Rami, coming to you finally on this question, again, sort of coming to you as the technologist on the panel, we mentioned deep learning, computer vision, wearables. I haven't heard really augmented reality sort of come in here, but, Rami, what are there any additional technologies that you think you're excited about that we haven't mentioned yet, or any other examples from these that have been mentioned that you think are interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think machine vision is starting to really make its way into frontline work, and I think it's really exciting, kind of like what's happening in that space. We were working on something that involved a goggle that would basically use augmented reality to show a technician in a tank farm where a potential leak is happening, and a tank farm is a substantially large area. So just kind of like augmenting the entire farm in his goggle, and then just showing him the potential of where the source of the leak is, or where the source of the blockage is, based on data streams that have come in previously, and machine learning about analyzing that data and then projecting that to the goggle. I think that's super exciting to see that technology starting to make its way to the front line. I think it also plays a part in safety, where machine vision has been used to be able to detect, for example, an illegal pedestrian crossing with a vehicle incoming at the same time as a human being crossing, and the machine vision being able to analyze that situation and quickly creating alerts and potentially even alerting the pedestrian on his mobile phone through SMS or something, in lightning speed, especially now with the 5G canopy being deployed in some countries. The amount of speed and low latency that we're experiencing is just unlocking more and more potential of how AI can really start shaping different parts of our lives and safety and work spaces. So I think, just in a way, I think the technology is still a little bit nascent, but I think it's going to be really exciting where it's going to lead to.
Excellent. So I think we have, a sort of plethora of examples of how AI is our friend and can be our friend. But of course, there still remains a fear factor, right? Whether that's generated by media or Hollywood. But, I think it'd be good just in this last 10 minutes just to address this and just to hear from you all around how, have you experienced this fear factor in your in your businesses? How have you addressed it? What do we need to do more of to address it? And so I wanted to first start with just a question to everyone, and really, how do you track this? Do you track this fear factor of your employees? Is it something you do consistently? Is it just sort of anecdotal that you hear about it, or in the context of the rollout of a new technology? Hands up, who wants to go first maybe on this? How do you track this? Rami, go for it.
Yeah, I think resistance and fear is a natural human behavior, whether it's AI or whether it's whatever else that's new. So I don't believe it's specific to AI. I think just resistance to change is human behavior, and we are proactive about it. So we talk about it, we communicate, we explain the reasons behind it, we explain the benefits of how it's going to help the person. We hear the feedback, we take the critique. Um, and we really spend time and effort in um, you know um, explaining how the technology is going to be used in a way that's going to be helpful and beneficial, rather than a way that's going to harm or create any discomfort for the employee. So I think being proactive about it, decimating the fear. And really, also, I think what's important, just a closing note on this, is doing things in stages rather than a big bang approach has been super helpful. So just kind of phasing it out between smaller teams, then expanding it out, and have really a little bit of a word of mouth going around between the teams, explaining to their peers how the technology is helpful and useful.
Yeah. Hannah?
Yeah, I think to add to that, maybe even 5, 6 years ago when AI was a really big buzzword and everyone wanted to deliver an AI project, it became, we're going to deliver AI. There's an AI initiative coming out. We're going to fund AI projects. And that maybe creates a bit of that fear factor when actually it's part of a natural transformation process, or any kind of digital transformation that new technology is going to be used. So one of the things that we sometimes try to do is, instead of saying, right, well, we're going to deliver this change and we're going to use AI to do it, really actually it's talking about, here's the benefit you're going to get from this technology. Here's the transformation we're going through. And then perhaps there's a question, well, how are we actually going to be able to do that? How are we going to automatically detect that risk? And the answer might be, well, we're using an AI algorithm, instead of positioning it up front as this is an AI project, which can sometimes have a bit of that reaction. And then, of course, the transparency piece, around, okay, so if we are going to use AI as part of this process, how and why are we using that? And, the black book concept that Joe mentioned earlier, or black box, sorry, not black book, black box concept that Joe mentioned earlier around, okay, so if I can't see what's happening in that algorithm, how do I know that it's right? Legal professionals in particular, very risk averse. How do I know that's the actual outcome? And traditionally, the answer for many vendors is, well, we actually can't tell you because that's our secret sauce. And if we showed you how the algorithm works, we would no longer operate. So really, we're moving away from that to actually something that is a lot more transparent. And certainly anymore for those in the vendor space, such as myself, this concept of actually we need to keep this all secret in terms of what we're delivering with AI. It's just not anymore what customers will accept. They really want to have their own data scientists, their own teams heavily involved in that. So transparency has become even more key as we get more advanced in terms of how we're using AI in businesses.
Yeah. And Joe, what about in your side in the food sector? Was there any backlash or concern, or did employees pretty much just see this as a win-win because it was helping them with these complex tasks that they were otherwise struggling with?
Yeah, for us, where it would start is I hope most folks on the panel would agree. If you really knew the current state of AI or general AI and its likelihood of replacing jobs today or anytime soon, the answer is no way. And there is some of that myth that needs to be dispelled that comes to media, entertainment, etc. For quick service restaurants, I mean, my favorite examples of how we combat that fear is when we have a person go visit our restaurants to help with the training or implementation of these systems that use AI. And I can tell you, like clockwork, when we do these market visits to see how our stores or restaurants are performing, there's initial hesitance. Old habits are hard to break. Change is hard. All that human emotion that Rami talks about is spot on. And what you often see is, hey, restaurant manager, the AI said that you shouldn't be sending this one delivery driver with 2 customer orders. It should be 1 because they'll make it back in time to pick up another and ensure it's hot for the next one. And someone that's been at it for 10, 20 years, I can tell you, they'll say, look, there's no way, right? I don't care what you say. There's no way we'll be able to make it. And there's that initial distrust. So like anything in life, trust is earned. And you need to have a leap of faith and say, hey, for this one order, please, let the AI do its thing. And let's just see what happens. And it's earned with every subsequent trial. And over time, you see the habit break, the eye twinkle, and acceptance comes in. It's a certain number of stages. And the only thing we hope is you could scale that emotion. But as we all know, there's no shortcut for change management in the acceptance curve. But for us, we're dealing with it one person at a time, one restaurant at a time. And as we ease into it, hopefully there's a fellowship or following who believes in the system and can then become its champion and promoter and tell new hires coming in, hey, just let that thing do its thing. It might seem a little goofy, but it's always right for the most part. But now we can focus on better customer experience, more order accuracy, and innovation, and other things that bring more joy to your day-to-day job.
Excellent. And then Mukesh, bring you in on this conversation. What was your experience?
Yeah, our experience is very similar to what Joe mentioned. Basically, we are seeing AI leading to better performance and, in fact, more hiring at places which have deployed more AI. So all the fears about that it will lead to less jobs and other things, they are perhaps fears of the future. At present, the experience has been that as companies are deploying more AI, they are able to perform better, and that's why they are able to hire more. And one of the things that we talk about is that currently the top executives of a company, they have tremendous support in making the right decisions. This is like in the olden days where the rich people had a lot of medicines and all other support system available to them, which was not available to the other people, to the regular folks. So what AI is doing is democratizing the smart assistants to everybody in the company. So rather than just the top executives, now even the middle and the lower frontline employees are getting the kind of, or will be getting the kind of services, the assistance that only the executives could get in the past. Imagine that future. So what this will lead to is basically everybody being able to make better decisions. And of course, the other part is that it is not technology which is the key thing. It is the business benefits and the other benefits that are coming out of the technology. So what Anna was talking about, that how do you frame this in a transformation context? How do you do the right change management, the right processes? Those are the key things. And AI is now the hidden story. It's not the front and the center. It is like Apple or other products, smart iPhones and smartphones, other smartphones. The AI is hidden. It's the magic it provides which leads to better job performance and our ability to do more meaningful work and not do the routine, boring work that we are forced to do when we don't have those assistants to us.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we have only 50 seconds left, so I don't think we'll be able to cover much. But maybe just allow me to wrap up. I think it's been a really fascinating conversation. I think you all really helped us to bring to life how AI is actually helping to transform and to improve workflows and productivity at all levels, which I think is really interesting. And this point about the fear factor, when I asked about are you tracking this, because it's interesting to know to what extent that is just a myth, and whether or not actually, if you do those surveys, they would show that there's rising satisfaction as AI is helping people focus on the more creative, more rewarding aspects of the job rather than those complex tasks, which we can now pass on to our friend AI. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate you joining us, and hope everyone tuning in has enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much.